kick things off by saying thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Danielle Webb, and I am the chairperson of the Fiscal Alliance Foundation, and we are a free market think tank located in Massachusetts, but we're involved with issues all over New England. And I'd also like to acknowledge our friends from Vermont who are here with us from the Ethan Allen Institute, which is another free market organization up in Vermont. Their chairperson, Rob Roper, gets the first question when we open it up for Q&A. So Rob, I hope you have a good question. In terms of how things are going to go, what I'll do is I'll say a few words. I'll introduce myself. I'll introduce Dana. I'll share a few comments about the book, ask Dana a few questions about the book, but I know everyone's going to be raring to go on asking Dana about a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. So don't worry, you'll absolutely get opportunities to ask questions. What I'll ask you to do is everyone is going to be muted just because we believe in good Zoom etiquette. And if you want to ask a question, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you, get you queued up, get your question in the chat and make sure it gets over to Dana. So with that, I'll get going. So my name is Danielle Webb. Like I said, I am the chairperson of the Fiscal Alliance Foundation. In my regular life, I am an immigration attorney and I own my own law firm, and I serve businesses, investors, and all sorts of folks who need help with immigration. And my favorite part is I sue the federal government on behalf when there's been an unfair denial or delay. So I like to say I'm a unicorn. I'm a conservative immigration attorney. So I love being involved in the Fiscal Alliance Foundation. It's wonderful to fight the good fight here in the Northeast, and it's so exciting to have everyone here. Without further ado, I want to introduce the reason why we're all here. Dana Perino, she needs no introduction, but I'll introduce her anyway. She is the co-host of one of the most popular shows on cable television, Fox News' The Five. She's co-anchor of America's Newsroom. She's an analyst for Fox News election coverage and specials, and the #1 New York Times bestselling author of And the Good News Is, Lessons and Advice from the Bright Side, and Let Me Tell You About Jasper. Perino is the former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush, where she was the first Republican woman to hold the job. She served for over 7 years in the administration, including at the Department of Justice after the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Perino lives in Manhattan with her husband, Peter McMahon, and Jasper, America's dog, who is very cute. He's very, very cute. And the book is this wonderful book called Everything Will Be Okay: Lessons and Advice for Young Women. And Dana, before I tell you what I thought, how did you come up with the title? Because I was really struck by it.
Thank you so much. And Danielle, I feel like we should be like watching your cable news show. You got such great presence. And thank you so much. It's great. It's been a hard book tour, difficult. Let's say hard. It's just been a very different type of way to talk about a book when you really can't go to many places. But I love the ingenuity and the fact that people are willing to do this virtually means a lot to me. And so your time I know is valuable. So we'll get to as much as we can. So my first book was called And the Good News Is, as you said. And it did very well. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It sold very well. And there was one chapter in that book, chapter 5, which was all my mentoring advice in one place. Because I was trying to be efficient, with my time. I got asked for a lot of mentoring coffees and lunches, and you just don't, you feel an obligation to give back, but it's just difficult. And I thought, well, maybe if I could at least put everything I'm thinking in one place, it would work. Well, I kept getting asked, I can do another book and another book. And in the publishing industry, if you have success with one book, they are likely to come back to you and ask you for more. I resisted for a long time because I felt like I didn't have enough to say or new to say. And I had a couple of ideas. Oh my gosh, I had the best book idea. So what I wanted to do was take off 6 months in between. This is going back a few years when I wasn't sure about signing another contract. It was like a moment to sort of take stock of our lives. If Peter and I are not from New York, do we want to keep doing this? do we want to move down to South Carolina where we had a home, and just couldn't decide. And so my idea was that we were going to get in an RV and we were going to go in a circle around America. I read this book years ago called Blue Highways, and I loved it so much. And I always wanted to do a travel essay book because I felt like I didn't have enough that I was experiencing to write about. I like to write about what things I've experienced. So I tell my husband, here's the idea. Take this time off. We'll go up and we'll see the bushes up in Maine. And then we'll go over to my family in Wyoming. We'll go to California, where we first lived, well, after we lived in England together. Go back, we'll go to Denver, where my family's. Then we'll go and see President Bush 43. And when we get back to the East Coast on I-95, the whole point of the book is that we will not decide if we are turning north or south until that moment. And Peter's like, got it. And he's kind of into it. And I said, and the kicker is this: we take Jasper and a new Vizsla puppy with us.
Oh.
And Peter said, you can't take a puppy on a road trip. And I was like, you are such a dream killer. And I was so upset. But now I've given you my pitch. One day I might do that book. So naturally, when I decided to do this book, and I felt like there was just enough building in me in terms of I had something to say to these young women, and not just those that were going through what I call the quarter life crisis, 25, 26 years old. Like, what am I doing here? Nothing's going my way. Maybe I didn't study the right thing. I thought I was going to get married by now. I thought I was going to do this, and nothing's happening. And you internalize all of this. But what I saw, Danielle, is that anxiety was following young women all the way into their 30s and beyond. So I initially was going to call the book something like a play off of the first one about great news. And it kept like, great news, everything will be okay. And I just would walk around and think about that. I'm like, it doesn't fit. I'm not here to just say everything's great. I'm here to say everything will be okay. But it's not a passive thing. Like, as you read the book, and thank you for doing so, there's a lot you got to do.
Yeah.
To make sure everything will be okay. So when I realized that I would overhear moms and dads telling their little kids, it's okay, it's okay. I tell Jasper, it's okay. My husband, to soothe my anxiety, what's up? Everything's okay. Sometimes I'll call him, I'm like, hey, what's up? He's like, everything's okay. Because I need to hear that. And I realized, actually, we all need to hear that over and over again. So then I came up with the title. When I got the cover, I showed it to a few of the young women at Fox when we were at the Cleveland debate. And this one young woman, she goes, oh, I really needed to hear that. I thought, okay, we got the best title then.
That's awesome. And because one of the things I loved about it was how practical it was. And one of the things that I struggled with when I'm in my late 30s and I'm a business owner, I'm an investor, I've really I saw myself 10 years ago, 15 years ago in the book. And I loved that it distilled a lot of the information that I got from my mentors and the folks I worked with, and people who saw something in me and pushed me to really blossom and not give up, and to not take the safe path. Because that was the thing I really liked about the book, is that you really lay out your path. Like, how did you get to be who you are today? And that it wasn't this linear path. There were forward, backward, sideways, diagonals, swirls, all sorts of things. But you didn't give up. And I loved the practicality. And I will say, as someone who's 6 feet tall, I loved your section on posture. Because there is nothing sadder to me than seeing a woman who is 6 feet tall who slouches. It drives me crazy. I'm like, actually, stand up tall, own it.
Whenever, if I go to take pictures with people, they will often try to either squat down or lean over. And I always say, absolutely not. Let's just stand tall.
Stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stand up straight. One of the other things that I found very moving in the book was your talk about mentorship, and particularly your relationship with President Bush. What is the greatest piece of advice he gave you?
So much. It was so interesting that I just saw him a couple of weeks ago. I got to go to the Bush Center in Dallas for my book, and he came with Mrs. Bush to our event. But then the next day, I interviewed him for his new book that's actually on immigration. Have you heard of this book,
Daniel? I have not.
It's called Out of Many, One, and he has painted the portraits of 43 immigrants, and then in very moving ways tells their story, the stories of each of them. So that came out yesterday, and
I'll have to pick it up.
That special runs on Sunday night, and at the book event that we did there, Margaret Spellings asked me, "What's the best advice the president ever gave you?" And I actually think that it came at the. Can I do two?
Please do.
One that's very practical and about management, and I think that for this group would be relevant. And the second one came after the White House. So Mass Financial. You'll remember the financial crisis of 2008. Well, my husband and I were having our 10-year anniversary, September 30th, 2008. And we had a plan to go to Utah for a week's vacation. And I had told the president about this or something. Then, of course, the financial crisis happens. They're trying to pass the TARP bill. And I just told my husband, I'm like, you know what? Let's just save this Utah vacation for next year. We'll do it then. So it was a Friday night. We were leaving the Oval Office meeting to go home for the weekend. And I just said, hey, Mr. President, by the way, I mentioned to you I would be gone next week because of the anniversary, but we're going to put that trip off and I'll be here next week. And he said, do you not have somebody who can fill in for you when you're gone that you have confidence in? And I said, well, yes, of course. I just feel that. He said, I expect you to go and celebrate your anniversary and we will be fine here. And the reason I mention that is because he was he was the first MBA president. Management was very much on his mind. And one of the ways that he not judged or like measured his people was, were they good managers of their teams? Mm. And you had to be able to be out for a day. Like if you had a migraine, then could Tony Fratto fill in for you? And so I passed that on along here in my life at Fox as well. Like, you have to be able to manage your team, and also don't be a boss hog. That was the other thing that I recommended in there. You have to allow your staff to have access to the CEO or the president. It's not going to hurt you if you do that. And so many people hold on to power and hold on to information and won't share it. That is not a good way to run a business or a government or a nonprofit, whatever it might be. The second piece of advice he gave me that I thought was the most valuable was, when I left the White House, some people think, oh, wow, she had such a smooth transition. She did so well. Well, it might look like that, but I had a lot of anxiety and all the things that were happening. And I had worked in public relations at a PR firm before. I didn't love it. But I felt like coming out of the White House, and this big firm wanted to hire me, and I thought, okay, I'll do it. Well, I was signing the contract, and I knew it was a mistake. I didn't love it. 6 to 8 months later, I went to Dallas to see the president, and it was for his book tour or something. And I walk in. The first thing he said was, "What's wrong?" I said, "Oh, nothing. How are you?" "I'm fine." He's like, "No, I can tell. What is it?" So I confessed what my situation was. And he said, "Well, why don't you just start your own business?" And well, I had 12, 13 reasons why I couldn't and shouldn't and wouldn't. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not persuaded by any of that." And he said, "Let me ask you, what's the worst thing that could happen if you start your business and it fails?" So I talk it through, and he says, "Okay, so you're telling me that the worst thing that could happen as the former White House press secretary is your business doesn't work out the way you want and you go to work for another PR firm? That's the worst thing?" He was very concerned about Americans being too risk averse.
Yeah.
And we need people who are willing to take a chance. And I talk about that in the book. Ask yourself that, what's the worst thing that could happen if I tried this? And usually it's not as bad as you think.
Well, and I think that really resonates with me, because I had that conversation with my husband when I had a career crossroads and deciding whether or not I was going to start my law firm or not. And it was very much an aha moment of like, you're right. I could just go work for someone else. You're right. Okay. Onward and upward. And it was the best decision I ever made. Do you think we have a lot of parents on this call right now? And one of the things I've noticed with women I've mentored, and a lot of parents of adult children, is particularly for women who are incredibly educated, there's this anxiety of like, what do I do? I'm not qualified enough. And it is this risk averseness of, and I see it with my own friends of, I'm just like, go for it. What's the worst that can happen? And then you get the list. How do you, when you're mentoring people, and that was one of the beautiful things in the book that you talked about, was your belief in mentoring and how you really, you put your money where your mouth is on that point. What do you say to kind of help get out of that mindset? Because I imagine there are parents and people on this call who are dealing with that with their sons and daughters, but I've noticed it particularly with women.
So I think there's a couple of things. One is, I actually just did this show with Lawrence Jones the other day. He was anchoring and he wanted to talk about my book, but then I realized what he really wanted was dating advice. And I think that this also happens with parents, is that especially with women, we just got to talk about our problems. Like we got to talk about our anxieties. And if you can get them talking, the most important thing you can do is just listen. Because pretty much women, like, they'll get to the right answer. Eventually, if they don't keep going around and around. So I think being a good listener is one. Also, I think sometimes dads in particular, sometimes moms, but dads in particular can try to solve your problem. They'll say, well, just do this or just do that. And sometimes women just need to talk it through and get to their own conclusion. And this goes for, I told Lawrence Jones and he said, oh my gosh, I try to solve every problem. I just want to get it. I'm like, I can do that. Like, you should just do that. And in fact, I have a girlfriend who's in a situation right now where there's been a change in management and her job is a little bit unclear. And her husband's given her a lot of pressure. Like, you need to tell them this and tell them that. And he doesn't understand the culture of the business that she's in. And she will get this right eventually. But I think the most important thing too that I say in the book is that I'm not telling you not to worry, because I know that you're going to. What I'm asking you to do, and I give some ways to do it, is can you take all of that anxiety that is holding you back from opportunities and convert it into fuel that will actually be productive?
Yeah.
And because I think when you tell women especially, you worry too much. Okay, well, let me just add that to the list of negative things about it.
Right. Absolutely.
And when my husband finished reading the book, the draft, he goes, wow, women think a lot. He said, you think more about what we're thinking than we actually spend thinking. And did a podcast, and it was the first time I was talking about the book, and he said, would you consider yourself an overthinker? I'm like, yes, and every woman I know is, especially if they're moving forward. Now, here's the thing, and this is the great news. If you were born in America, you already won life's great lottery. If you are an educated woman in America, then you just have to decide how hard do you want to work.
Yep.
Now, my dad, one of the things he did when I was in third grade, I had to read the Rocky Mountain News and Denver Post before he got home from work and be prepared to discuss 2 articles before dinner. That set me on a path, right? Now, he didn't say, I'm going to do this, and then therefore she's going to become the White House press secretary. But there are things that you do as you invest. And if your parents, there might be some grandparents on the phone too, like my grandfather was such an important influence on my life. And sometimes it's those little things of letting them figure it out. But the unconditional love, just knowing that they're okay. The last thing I would say about my dad is I was in graduate school and working at a local television station, which I thought that was going to be my path. And I got very uncomfortable with what I saw as my first kind of experience with bias in the media.
Yeah.
At the same time, I got sent to cover a murder trial of a child. And I was told to go to the courthouse and get an interview with the mother, who was in grief. And I went there and I circled her 3 or 4 times, and I realized I don't have the stomach to do it. Now, today, could the Dana Perino of today do it? Yeah, sure, maybe. But I was 21 years old. And I went back to the studio and I didn't have it. And I called my dad that night and said, I think I just took out a big student loan for a graduate degree and something I don't want to do. And instead of admonishing me, which is what I thought might come, because women always expect that they're going to disappoint everybody, especially male figures in their life. My dad said, we'll just pick you up at graduation. We'll come home and you'll figure it out. And he didn't say, this is what you're going to do, or this is how we're going to fix it. It was, you'll figure it out. And there was a safety net. And I went home, and I, as every good graduate of a graduate school program does, I went home and lived in my parents' basement and waited tables for a while. And then, of course, it all worked out.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I say, as an immigration attorney who runs in conservative circles, and liberal circles too. I mean, I live in the Northeast, right? You know, some of my closest friends are super liberal. And one of the things I've always said about America, because I see it with my clients, from the billionaires I've worked with to the poorest of the poor, coming here for asylum. There is something about America that is amazing. And we have our imperfections and things we need to work on and improve on. But the idea that being in America is not the greatest place in the world to live, it's just nonsense. Again, there are wonderful other places in the world, but there is something special about the United States.
Well, and also I think a lot of young women, like if they're reading all the women's magazines, or I don't even know how to get on TikTok, but I'm assuming this is there. The idea that women are victims in the workplace. Look, I understand, believe me. Where I'm sitting, like, I understand that sexual harassment happens. And I talk about integrity in the book, and also standing up for yourself. And the culture is changing, and women have made so many gains. We've got ways to go, especially in corporate America. I think the government has done an incredible job. Like, I was a second woman White House press secretary, but now that's like, I don't know if we'll ever see a man in that position again.
Right.
So I just want them to know that you might think that the guys in the office have an edge. All right, well, but let's just think this through. Let's just be logical. And if you look at statistics now, Danielle, especially, women are now, the majority of women in the country are the main breadwinner of households all across America. They're getting more law degrees, doctoral degrees. Now, could we use more women in engineering? Absolutely. And do we need to be thoughtful about how we deal with the issue of work-life balance and helping women be able to do it all, or do it all over the course of a lifetime? Absolutely. But women right now, they're in the driver's seat. They need to stop thinking about themselves as victims.
Yeah. And I think it's particularly off-putting from women like you and myself, who are at the top of, you know, the top of the pile, you know, with the level of education. I mean, your professional success, like the idea that women who are at the pinnacle of their professions are victims is just, it makes me crazy. Because I'm like, let's move forward. How do we make things better? How do we give a hand up to those that are coming after us in terms of mentorship and paying it forward? I think that's such a better place to be focused than, you know, victims, being a victim, or things that don't go our way, even though we can improve them and do better. But I think now I should open it up for questions, because I'm sure people are like chomping at the bit to ask you questions. So Rob from Ethan Allen Institute, you're on deck. I don't know if Paul Ganji can unmute you, or if you can unmute yourself, and we can get your question.
Hey, well, I think I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
I see you.
Oh, excellent. Well, Dana, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is great. My question for you, it's a question and a plea sort of wrapped together. And I want to talk about the Georgia voting law, and that being in the news these days, because we in Vermont all the focus is on Georgia, what the Georgia law does. But in the last election, Vermont sort of did the preview of HR1. Our election system, when we mailed out ballots to everybody, we have no signature verification. We have no voter ID requirements. There's basically no way to determine if a mail-in ballot is being counted for the person to whom it's being attributed to, basically. And if you press our election officials here, they'll say, "Oh, there's no such thing as voter fraud." Well, how do you know if you can't prove that the 76% of the ballots were sent in by the person who was sent it in? How do you know? So it's a total mess. And my question to you is, how do we in Vermont get folks like yourself in the national center-right conservative media to focus on things that are happening in our state that have a national implication? I've tried in the past, and I just don't think I'm very good at it, or I'm doing it the wrong way. So I'm asking you for advice and with my question. Thank you.
Well, sure, I'll put my PR hat on. It's a good question. I mean, Amy Walter, I don't know if you know her name. She's a columnist for National Journal for Charlie Cook. Is that his name? The Cook Political Report.
Okay.
And she has just wrapped up a long podcast series that was great. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, she wrote a piece about all the different voting laws that are happening. It's all across the country. I think maybe one of the problems in terms of focusing just on Vermont is that because we are in a redistricting year, and because of the last election that we had, almost every state is putting forward legislation. And it comes in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And in our federalist system, the states have some authority here, right? They can decide. And the federal government says, well, okay, well, if it's a federal election, should we weigh in, et cetera. So I think in some ways, one of the things that the states need to do through their state organizations, through the Governors Association or something like the RGA, for example, is to try to move forward as a unit. Because Vermont's the only one. I think it would be hard, frankly, just knowing how much news is coming in and what the time we have for things. On the television front, I'm thinking of America's Newsroom in particular. I think moving forward as a unit and telling these stories makes a big difference. Stacey Abrams, for example, I know this because I was in San Antonio doing a little book event in March, and I was just shooting the breeze with the folks there. And they said that they were trying to have more in-person events as Texas opened up. And I said, who's your next event? And he said, it's actually Stacey Abrams. I said, oh, from Georgia? I said, yeah, like, oh, what's she coming here for? She's on a 20 city book tour and lecture series that she's doing about voting. And are the Republicans doing the same anywhere? I don't think so.
No.
And so, again, I think that moving forward as a unit, one of the problems that any party has when they lose the White House is that you don't know who the leader is. Like, it takes a while to sort that out. And so the Republicans are kind of going through that right now as they wait to see what's going to happen. But I still think the RGA, the Republican Governors Association, is a great one to work through. And on the merits, the other thing I would say is this, especially at Fox News, our website, foxnews.com, is an incredible place to try to get information out. A column or an op-ed that you can write that can get placed there, it will be seen by, I think if they have something like 100 million fresh downloads a month. And it's right up there now. It's after Google. I think it goes Google News, CNN, Fox, or maybe we have even beat CNN on that front. This is to say that producers are always looking for what's online. What are people looking at? And so getting on air is one thing, but like the stepping blocks, I always find that producers like to have something that they can look at that has been written already. So that would be another piece of advice. Just tactical advice, I think, is a really good one.
So just foxnews.com, and that's where you submit something, or do you have to?
Well, no. Lynn Jordal Martin is one of the people. I think there's a link there, and I can't think of her last name, but there's a group there that it takes the submissions and figures out what they want to put on. But to me, I think it'd be kind of interesting for people to realize that Vermont's already been through this. Like, it could be something that, heads up, states, this is what happened in Vermont. It could be coming your way. Be smarter, or something like that, like something that's provocative.
No, that's cool. So I'll just say it. Our Secretary of State today, Jim Condos, was a senator who really went after Jesse Waters when Jesse came here to do a story on Jessica's Law for Bill O'Reilly. So if he wants revenge, this is the story.
I have a line into Jesse, indeed, the new daddy.
Thank you very much, Dana. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Our next question is from Erica.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Perino. It really means a lot to have you here with us. I'm going to give you my premise for my question, and I promise I'll be quick.
Okay.
Okay. So many people know the left uses Vermont as a petri dish for new policy. So you'll hear other states say, oh, well, if it passes in Vermont, we'll try it here. And yet, even though we're a traditionally libertarian state, the right does not do the same thing. So I'll give you that Leahy and Sanders are very formidable opponents, but Trump got well over 100,000 votes in this state. And so I'm wondering, that's more than half the votes needed to win a Senate seat. So if we got a more likable candidate, love or hate Donald Trump, if we got a more likable candidate, I feel like these would be the two cheapest seats that the GOP could win to flip the Senate red.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why or can you give any advice as to how, number one, how we can get national attention to get some help with that, and also why the GOP has just sort of given up on us up here?
Oh gosh, I didn't know they had. Although I think it's interesting. I think that, am I right that Vermont is the only state that George W. Bush didn't visit when he was president? Because didn't they say they were going to arrest him for war crimes if he landed in Vermont? I mean, I do think that's what it was.
I don't remember that. I apologize. I wouldn't be surprised, but.
Well, I mean, partly it might be candidate recruitment. And also, again, like what Danielle and I were just talking about is what's the worst that could happen if you take a chance, right? Why isn't Erica running?
I totally would.
Oh, you would?
No, I totally would.
Oh,
absolutely. Sure. If we can get some support. I ran for state Senate last year, actually, in Chittenden County. Mm-hmm. And we moved the bar from the last time in 2018, the Republican lost by 15,000 votes. Okay. And this year, in 2020, we only lost by 3,000 votes.
Look at you.
So
look, I mean, I think that part of the thing is that you chip away at it, right? And it's not necessarily, a lot of people think that there's instant gratification in running, but a lot of people, like Newt Gingrich, did he run like 5 times before he ever won 1 or 3 times? Thank you, Jim. And Abraham Lincoln was the same. And look, I think that maybe do you have a Republican governor?
Yes, technically, technically speaking, yes, but ideologically, no.
Yeah. Look, I don't know enough about the state's politics, obviously. But I think that you make a really good point, is that part of the thing is like just defying conventional wisdom. Like, for example, like think about AOC. Okay. This young woman took the Democratic congressional guy there. I can't even remember the guy's name. He's been in office forever.
Yep.
And he didn't take her seriously at all. In fact, at the one debate that was scheduled, he sent a surrogate to debate her.
He didn't even show up. Yeah.
And so what did she do? She just chipped away at it over and over. And now look at her. So, sometimes you can actually just like take them by surprise. And I think a lot of what she did, just a lot of old fashioned door knocking, handshaking. And then she was very proficient and very good at social media. Still is.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat from one of my fellow Fiscal Alliance Foundation board members, Mike Kane. And I think he's talking about how we don't have in our system independent verification of a voter's citizenship. And I think, which is very surprising, in New Hampshire, I think it does get checked, because when I registered, I had to show my passport. So it's that, I mean, that's the big problem, is that it's 50 states who do different things.
Yeah.
I think the larger question from Mike's observation, which is a great one, is if you were advising the Republican Governors Association or something, the Republicans, what would be an effective PR strategy to get people to like not see every attempt at election security as racism? Because I think that's what's shutting down the conversation, is that any attempt to talk about election security, voter ID, et cetera, it's couched as, you know, you just don't want people of color to vote. When, I mean, personally, I think it's insulting to think that people of color don't have IDs. That's just nonsense. But what would your advice be?
Like if you're a person that doesn't have an ID, your situation in life is probably very different.
Correct.
Right. And one of the things that Nikki Haley did when she was governor, she signed a law to have voter ID in the state. She was called, what you're saying. And one of the things she did is she said, we will, if you don't have an ID and you want one and you want to vote, we, on our dime, we will come and get you. We will pick you up. We will deliver you to the DMV office. We will pay for your license or whatever it is they do in terms of state ID, in terms of South Carolina, and we will return you home. And 8 people took her up on it. And what she told me not too long ago is that actually shut down the conversation in the state. And that's South Carolina.
Right.
Okay. The other thing is, check me on this in terms of, I don't remember the exact statistic, but a friend of mine is in Democratic politics, and he said that when it comes to voter ID, even like amongst Democrats, it's something like 74% of people agree there should be voter ID.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, sticking to the facts and sticking to your guns on that one point makes a big difference. But I think Nikki Haley's approach is a really good one.
Yeah, that's really good.
She might be, I don't know how often you all do this, but she might be a good guest for you guys, because one, she's been through it, but she also has a little bit of time with some distance to look across the country and with her travels, and maybe be able to provide some additional thoughts.
That's a really great idea. Well,
I can put you in touch if you want.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome, because she would be, I know all of our members would love to chat with her and get her perspective. We have another question from Lisa. Lisa, you're up.
She has a book as well.
Thanks, Jim.
I do. I have your book. So I also have Dana. I'm pleased to meet you.
Hi.
From Vermont. I have a 27-year-old daughter, and a couple of weeks ago she had a medical appointment, and we were chatting afterwards, and she was telling me that the doctor was telling her giving her a lot of information, and she was like, yeah, my mom already told me that. My mom already told me that. And so we were kind of laughing about it afterwards. And so when we were talking about it, she said, Mom, sometimes I just need to hear it from someone else. And I thought, this is so perfect. It's so perfect, because I just started reading it, and I love it. And I think that this is going to be so perfect for her to hear someone else telling her the things probably that I already told her, but
yeah,
but it has much more meaning coming from you, obviously.
Sometimes,
and we both are. Thank you. And thank you. I just want to also thank you for being such a classy, kind, conservative woman. We need to see more of that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support. And I hope that she does, you know, hopefully she'll read the book, or I did record the audio. These young people tend to like the audio books. So I recorded that myself so that they could hear it as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
While I'm waiting for someone else to ask a question, I'll ask you a question about immigration. What do you think the chances are that immigration reform happens? My response is neither party acts in good faith when it comes to immigration.
Yep.
And they've been talking about it since 1986, and I was 2 when that happened. So what do you think?
So it's interesting. Obviously I went through this battle in 2006 and 7. We were so close. I mean, people forget, like, we were really close, but guess who pulled it back? Harry Reid and Barack Obama.
Yep.
They wanted to run on it in 2008. And, Biden was part of that crew too. I saw what they did to Obama and then to Donald Trump. Any president that tries gets rebuffed. I would like to sound more optimistic about it. I just have seen it not working out. Part of me wonders if the idea of doing it in a comprehensive way needs to be set aside.
Yeah.
Because it's all the issues all at once, and you can find a reason to not vote for them. But if we were to triage the issue, and that maybe say border security is at the #1 issue, and then maybe you just take it piecemeal, right? You do a little border security, and then you do maybe if they want to reform asylum laws, okay, fine. I do think they made a huge mistake last week and not being very clear at the White House about what refugee office is versus asylum seekers versus the people coming across the border illegally. And I thank you, Danielle, for nodding. I mean, I was pulling my hair out that they weren't explaining that. I grew up with parents that helped resettle refugees from the former Soviet Union in Denver, Colorado through Lutheran Family Services. And anyway, there's that. The worker issue is going to increase.
Yeah.
We've been interviewing some people this week, especially restaurant owners. They cannot find staff. And there was this woman from Texas, her name is Mary, and she runs, her restaurant is called Enchiladas Ole. This is the great time of year for them. People love to come to the patio, have their margaritas, and she didn't have enough staff, so she has to close the patio. The customers are unhappy. Some customers were understanding enough that they were helping her bus tables. She had to ask her dad, who's 76 years old, to come out of retirement. He had stent surgery last week. He helped her over the weekend to try to keep this business going. There could be the worker issue if it continues, and partly this is because of what is going on with enhanced unemployment benefits through September. I just wonder if you could take a chip at this, not in a comprehensive way, but in a triage way. That might be a way to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Next question is from Helen.
Hello,
Helen, you're up. Oh, Helen, I think you're on mute.
That's the most universal phrase. You're on mute.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for
Hi, Helen.
and Danielle, you're doing an awesome job. So just a comment, Dana, I ran for Congress this past cycle, primarily because there's such a lack of candidates and people willing to run and take on the burden of the nasty, basically.
Yeah.
Our Secretary of State and the man I ran against, 2 men, tried to kick me off the ballot, and I had to go through the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts to get my name back on the ballot after doing everything I was supposed to do. It got 0 media coverage. So I just wanted to thank you for just encouraging people, like you said, Newt Gingrich, Abraham Lincoln. People try, and people do it for different reasons. And mine's, an ode to my dad, a World War II vet, and also to my children, because I feel their freedoms are being taken away. But my question to you is, all about our freedoms. And do you feel a responsibility to report facts? And how do you get around that when maybe your station is saying this is the narrative? How do you get around that? Because I just feel this country is going in such a bad direction, and there aren't enough voices at the table, nor are they welcome, it seems, when it comes to the vaccine or shutdowns or whatnot. So I just feel, do you have a personal responsibility to?
Of course. I mean, but that's also, but I don't get told what to say ever. So in fact, I start off the book talking about that with a story about this young woman that called me, who she was being asked to say something on behalf of her boss, a member of Congress, that she thought was inappropriate and undignified and ungracious. And she was worried that she would get fired if she didn't say it. And my advice to her was, you absolutely can't say it, but let's talk about a way to help him get his message out in a way that doesn't put you in a compromising position. And she was able to do that. But I remember she said, well, I don't think I can say no because I'm not Dana Perino. I said, well, how do you think I became Dana Perino? That it builds up over time. And the other thing about running for office for women, it's very interesting. I was at this event where I heard it was a place where they were trying to encourage more conservative women to run. But it was a mix of men and women in the audience. And this person got up for their presentation and said, okay, here you need basically 5 characteristics to run for office. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not characteristics, but 5 things to run for office. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could see in the room, like a couple of the guys were like, I got 2 of those. I'm gonna give it a shot. But women are like, okay, I have 4 of those. And then if I work really hard and apply myself for the next 3 years, then I can maybe get the 5th one. And then I'll think about and we like overthink things. So the fact that you were willing to jump in and run and for all of those good reasons that you did, I really admire that. And I think that the more that we can support people running and to let them know that, be their shield for the nasties, as you put it, whether it be online or in the newspaper, and let them know that
Keeping it clean, Dana. Yes.
Yeah.
It's just the environment you're in, and when I have 4 kids, so to take that time to do it,
That's a lot.
big, but it's really necessary, and that's how our parents or my parents raised me, to step up, step in. If there's a bully, try to get between that bully and whoever they're being. And that's sort of around in Massachusetts. I think a lot of us who are conservative feel bullied, whether you want to get a vaccine or not, or wear a mask or not. This state is really, unfortunately, just a major lockdown state where you would think it would be so much more ahead.
Well, hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel here as we start to see some alleviation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions, and I see that we have them in the chat. So I'm going to call on Rick, and then Joy, you have the last question. So Rick, you're up.
Okay, well, thank you, Dana, for joining. I'm one of 14 county chairs in the state of Vermont. And, you've addressed some of this, but I guess the issue is that we're a blue state. We're a heavily blue state. And a lot of people just feel like they can't make a difference. They won't make a difference, even if they try. And we're out there pedaling really hard to encourage people. So seeking your guidance a little bit as we are faced with the most liberal abortion laws in the country, as we're faced with the tightening of gun rights, people just feel a little beleaguered. And I'm delighted with your book, quite frankly. I think it brings some fresh perspective and keeps us motivated. But what would you say to our constituents in our counties?
Thank you for serving. My grandfather was a county commissioner in Weston County, Wyoming. Although it's so interesting to have grown up there and in Colorado, when Colorado was red before California came in. And to listen to what you're dealing with, it was the exact opposite, right? For where I grew up. And now I lived in Washington, D.C., and now I live in New York City. And it's actually kind of interesting, maybe sad, that I don't really know what's going on around here in terms of local news. I don't watch local news. I know who my congressman is, but I'm just dismayed. And yeah, I think a lot of us who live up here think that we can't make a difference either. And actually, I had some friends recently. We're about to have a mayor's race here in the city. And some of my friends dropped their Republican registration to register as Democrats so that they could vote in that primary in order to try to make a difference in terms of getting the best possible person of that group to run. I thought that was very interesting, and it hadn't crossed my mind. I'm not willing to do that, but I understood the sentiment. I also think that figuring out a way to communicate in new and exciting ways is really important. One thing that's kind of exciting is there are some young people now that are definitely more conservative than their parents. And they are creative, and they know how to use social media in ways that I've never even thought of. And sometimes these things are generational and cyclical. So the fact, if you have a young Republicans group, maybe call upon them, give them a shot. I think that in some ways, if you look at the Democratic Party in terms of the leadership, like on Capitol Hill, it's like, I mean, my goodness, I think everybody's in their 80s. Like, nothing against people in their 80s, but at some point they're going to have to turn over the reins to some of these younger people that can do some things. And the Republicans could learn from that too. Share the experience, mentor somebody, and give them a chance, and also take a risk, because what's the worst that could happen? Really, if you think about it.
All right, we have time for one last question, and it's from Joy. Joy, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here. Dana, I'm really thrilled to get the chance to talk to you. Hi, Danielle. It's great to see you too, and everybody. My question is, I'm a little older. I don't want to say how old, but I have struggled as a business owner throughout the last 30 years on my own to really be strong. It's hard. I found the hardest thing as a woman is to kind of get rid of that devil on my shoulder that's constantly telling me, oh, it's okay to give in this once or back down this once, and to not, say or do what's in my mind and stick with it. How have you found that? You are a beautiful and talented younger woman, as I can see, and you have obviously conquered that. Or is it something that you do?
I struggle too. In fact, just this morning, Joy, I wanted to rip someone's head off. Let me tell you something. He deserved every minute of what I was about to give him.
Yeah.
And then I'm just always reminded of something I think, as my grandfather said, I want to be proud of myself. So what's the productive way for me to deal with this?
Yeah.
What am I going to get out of this argument with this person? Unfortunately, Joy, I actually got in an argument with this person.
Oh.
And I have felt like shit ever since. And I am upset about it.
I know.
And now I'm having therapy with Mass Financial because in a very rare moment, I let my guard down.
It happens to me, and I just
and I think that I talk about in the book how there's sometimes young women will come and they'll say, we just have this weird thing that we want to be liked.
Yes.
Okay. That's just a thing that also, as parents and grandparents, everybody, that's just human nature. People are going to want to be liked.
Yeah.
But what I would try to tell them is, and to tell myself and remind myself here, is that what's even more important is to be respected. And also, can you respect yourself? I'm mad now because I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have just ignored him. That's actually also that.
I keep thinking I'm going to do
I'll tell
better.
You one thing I used to do in the White House. I talk about this in my first book, but a lot of people don't remember. I would often be asked, how do you stay so calm at the podium and the reporters are being so awful? And there were a couple of reporters there that they would really get to me. So sometimes, Joy, one thing I would do is I would just listen to their questions, and with the podium right there, I would rest my hand next to my water on the shelf where nobody could see, and I would just flip them off the whole time. And I couldn't believe it the other day. A friend of mine who has a daughter reached out to me and said that her daughter had called and she was having a problem where she felt like she was being bullied at work. And she had to go to a meeting where she had to listen to these people, whatever. And her mom said, well, you should do what Dana did. And under the table, just flip them off the whole time. And keep a smile on your face. And how empowering that can be. And just
That's great.
I am not for women pushing down emotions. Obviously, I just told you my whole morning problem here. But there is a time and a place for it, right? And
Yeah.
I never cried on air actually until I was about a couple of months ago. My first time ever on air crying. This woman, we were talking about a situation about no cash bail. It's a terrible policy that's happening. And this woman was willing to come on the show. Her child had been murdered, and she had almost been murdered because her ex-husband, who was there was a restraining order. He was supposed to be in jail and going to court that day, but he had a no cash bail situation. And instead of going to court for his hearing, he came to her home instead, and her child was killed. And I started crying, and I was so embarrassed. But about 2 weeks later, I went to
So
get
I
my,
watched that.
yeah, I went and got my first jab. And as I was leaving, the head of the hospital said, I just wanted to thank you for the interview that you did with the woman that was the domestic violence victim. I said, oh, were you watching? He said, no, but my daughters were. I said, where'd they see that? And they found it on YouTube. I'm like, it's on YouTube? I
boy.
had no idea. But he said it meant so much to them that you were so moved by her. And it showed them that it's okay to do that. And maybe if we are willing to show a little bit more emotion, we can accomplish a little bit more rather than being so reticent, because women have a special way of communicating. And for all of you that are running for office or running businesses, don't worry so much about being liked. Do you like yourself? That's good enough.
Right.
And then
That's awesome.
can you be respected?
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Good luck to you, Joy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. And that was such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful note to, I just said wonderful a lot, but it was a wonderful note to end this really great talk we've had. Thank you, Dana, so much. I really appreciate it. And I know I speak for everyone on the call, all of our members of the Fiscal Alliance Foundation and the Ethan Allen Institute. Everyone is just so grateful that you joined us today. So thank you. And if you're ever in the New England area, we'd love to host you. We'll host you in Boston. If you're ever in New Hampshire for election stuff, I live in Southern New Hampshire.
I love New Hampshire.
New Hampshire's wonderful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we are very happy in New Hampshire.
A lot of Colorado, actually. So.
Yes, it's like with smaller mountains.
A very good governor. Very good governor.
Yeah, very thankful. I won't make comments because people from other states on the call might get upset. So
the Vermonters, I don't know what to do. I feel like I need to send a care package up there.
Yeah. Well, the Massachusetts Governor Baker is, or I like to call him King Baker right now because of the powers that he's been granted. But anyway,
Or taken.
Yeah. But anyway, I thank you so much for joining us. We want to be respectful of your time and let you go. If anyone had any other questions for Dana, please send them to Anne and she'll make sure we get an answer for you. But again, Dana, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Danielle. Danielle, you did a great job.
Oh,
Danielle's
thanks,
gonna get a
Jim.
job in TV next.
Yes, exactly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dana.
Hey, Danielle,
Yes.
what is Anne's email address?
I can put it in the chat.
Oh, bless
And I'm
you.
right here
Thank you.
too, so.
And do you
Oh,
mind
hey,
if I
I'm
put